On March 14, 1944, over northern France, Lieutenant Thomas Archer did something that should have ended his career. He broke formation during a dogfight, dove beneath engagement altitude at near-suicidal speeds, and shot down 2 German fighters in 30 seconds. When he landed, he was placed under investigation for insubordination. His commander recommended court-martial. His fellow pilots refused to speak to him. No one understood that Archer had accidentally discovered a tactic that would save hundreds of lives and change air combat doctrine forever. But first, the Air Force would have to accept that breaking the rules could win wars. In 1942, American fighter doctrine was simple. Maintain formation, stay above 15,000 feet, never chase individual targets. The rules existed for good reason. German pilots used low-altitude decoys to lure Allied fighters into ambushes. Dozens had died following isolated targets downward, but by early 1944, the doctrine was killing more pilots than it saved. German fighters had learned to exploit American predictability, positioning ambush elements below engagement altitude where they knew Allied pilots wouldn't go. Lieutenant Archer had grown up on a Montana ranch with no interest in aviation. He barely passed flight school and arrived in England in January 1944 with a reputation for poor formation discipline and unconventional decisions under pressure. What he had was an instinct for three-dimensional geometry. He didn't see the sky as altitude bands. He saw it as exploitable space. The mission on March 14th was routine bomber escort. The orders were clear. Stay high, stay together, engage only threats to the bombers. At 0947 hours, German FW-190 fighters attacked from above. The dogfight erupted at 18,000 feet. In the chaos, Archer looked down and saw 2 enemy fighters circling at 10,000 feet, waiting to ambush any Allied pilot foolish enough to chase them. Archer realized something. The German pilots were watching the fight above. They weren't watching above themselves. He pushed the P-38 into a 60-degree dive. The aircraft shuddered violently. The controls stiffened as he approached compressibility, the aerodynamic edge where the plane could tear itself apart. He held the dive to 10,000 feet, came out directly behind both German fighters and destroyed them before they could react. 28 seconds, 2 kills, perfect execution. When Archer landed, his squadron commander was waiting. "You're grounded, Lieutenant. Report to my office immediately." Major William Hastings didn't care about the kills. Archer had violated altitude discipline, executed a dive that could have killed him, and abandoned his wingman without orders. "You're not a hero, Lieutenant. You're a liability." Archer was confined to quarters. His gun camera footage was confiscated. For 2 weeks, no one spoke to him. But the footage was being reviewed by intelligence officers and a civilian economist named Dr. Raymond Howell, who had been studying why American pilots kept dying despite numerical superiority. Howell's analysis was radical. American pilots were losing because they were too disciplined. They followed rules that made them predictable. And predictability was fatal. Archer's dive had proven something dangerous. Breaking doctrine could work. The question was whether the Air Force could accept a solution that violated everything it taught. Captain Daniel Corwin was a mathematician, not a pilot. His job at the 8th Fighter Command was to analyze combat losses and find patterns. What he found was disturbing. Pilots who maintained strict formation discipline died more often than pilots who broke formation under specific conditions. In a classified memo, Corwin wrote, "We are teaching our pilots to die in an orderly manner. The Germans know our doctrine better than we do. They exploit it, and we keep following it." The memo was filed and ignored. Then Archer's gun camera footage arrived. Corwin watched it 17 times. What he saw wasn't recklessness, it was geometry. Archer had exploited a blind spot in German tactics by attacking from an angle they never expected. Corwin wrote a second memo to Brigadier General Howard Mitchell. Lieutenant Archer's engagement represents tactical innovation, not insubordination. The maneuver was high risk, but calculated. If codified, it could be taught. Mitchell read it, then made an unexpected decision. He ordered Archer to prove it could be taught. On April 3rd, Archer stood before General Mitchell and 4 senior pilots. "Lieutenant, I'm giving you a choice. Accept court-martial or train 3 pilots to execute your maneuver successfully. If you succeed, we adopt it. If you fail, you're grounded for the war." Archer had 2 weeks. 3 pilots volunteered. Lieutenant Richard Hayes, cautious, methodical, 26 missions without a kill. Lieutenant James Callahan, aggressive, talented, dangerous. Second Lieutenant Maria Voss, one of 6 female pilots in the 8th Air Force, stuck flying ferry missions because women weren't allowed in combat. They weren't the Air Force's best, they were the ones no one else wanted. Archer explained the maneuver. German fighters at low altitude watch the fight above. They don't watch above themselves, dive from directly overhead, faster than they expect, close before they react. But you have to commit fully, hesitate and you're dead. Hayes asked, "How do you avoid compressibility?" Archer paused. "You don't avoid it, you manage it. Feel when the controls stiffen. Start your pullout earlier than you think." Callahan frowned. "That's not a tactic, that's intuition." Archer had no answer. He'd flown by instinct, not procedure. Training began immediately. Hayes followed instructions exactly but landed shaking. "I thought the wings would tear off." Callahan pushed the dive steeper, hit 500 mph, and briefly blacked out from G-forces. When he landed, he was grinning. "Let's do it again." Archer shook his head. "If you black out in combat, you're dead." Voss executed the dive perfectly on the first attempt. When Archer asked how it felt, she said, "Like falling with purpose." Archer wrote that phrase down. It would later appear in the training manual. The live test was scheduled for April 18th, a bomber escort mission over France. If German fighters appeared at low altitude, Archer's element was authorized to engage using the dive tactic. At 0847 hours, 12 German fighters appeared. 2 circled at 12,000 feet, waiting to ambush. Archer keyed his radio. "Element on me, we're going down." 4 P-38s dove in sequence. Archer destroyed the lead fighter. Hayes got the second. Callahan overshot, but recovered. Voss held fire. The targets were already dead. 32 seconds, 2 kills, no losses. Then 4 more German fighters appeared, using the same tactic. Archer didn't hesitate. "We're going again." This time was faster, more violent. Voss destroyed 1. Archer got another. The remaining Germans fled. When they landed, General Mitchell was waiting. "Your gun camera footage will be reviewed. If it confirms what I saw, we move forward. If not, this ends." The footage showed 4 P-38s executing coordinated high-speed dives against enemies who never saw them coming. On April 20th, Mitchell made his decision. The Archer dive maneuver will be incorporated into training doctrine immediately. Lieutenant Archer, all charges are dropped. You're reassigned to develop training protocols. Archer felt no relief. Only the weight of knowing other pilots would now fly what he'd discovered by accident. Some wouldn't come back. 3 weeks later, Archer sat staring at a typewriter, trying to turn instinct into instructions. Captain Corwin read his notes and crossed them out. "This reads like poetry. It's useless." Archer had written, "Trust the aircraft, trust the geometry. Don't think, react." Corwin wrote, "Initiate dive at 60-degree angle. Monitor airspeed. Do not exceed 480 mph. Begin pullout at 8,000 feet. "That's not how it works," Archer protested. "If you're thinking about numbers, you're too slow." "Then how do we teach it?" Maria Voss solved it. "Don't describe the feeling, describe the decision points, give them a checklist." The manual that emerged was 23 pages, Tactical Bulletin 44-7, High-Speed Vertical Engagement Doctrine. Conditions for execution: enemy at least 5,000 feet below enemy, not actively maneuvering. Clear visibility. No threat from above. If all 4 conditions met, execute. If not, maintain formation. The manual also included Failure modes. What to do when things went wrong. The language acknowledged that mistakes would be fatal. Distributed in May 1944, reactions were mixed. Some commanders embraced it. Others called it institutionalized suicide. One veteran wrote, "We're teaching young pilots to dive into situations they cannot control, based on a manual written by a lieutenant who got lucky once." General Mitchell's response, "Then don't teach it, but don't stop others from learning it." The first real test came on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Over Normandy, more than 30 dive maneuvers were executed. 23 resulted in kills. 3 resulted in American pilots crashing. The tactic worked, when executed correctly. By August, the maneuver had 127 confirmed kills. It had also killed 19 American pilots, most from compressibility-related loss of control. The numbers were analyzed and accepted. The maneuver was dangerous, but it was effective. Captain Archer continued training pilots until war's end. He never flew combat again. Now I invite you to leave in the comments where you are watching us from and the exact time you are listening to this story. We are interested in knowing how far and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. By late 1944, the high-speed vertical engagement maneuver had 400-plus confirmed kills. It had also killed 73 American pilots. Most deaths were pilot error, misjudged angles, excessive speed, late pullouts. Some were mechanical failure. But a third category haunted Captain Archer: pilots who did everything right but died anyway. Lieutenant Richard Hayes flew the maneuver successfully 4 times. On August 9th, diving near Stuttgart, he unknowingly passed through an ice cloud at 15,000 feet. Ice shards cracked his canopy and destroyed his left engine. Hayes lost control and ejected too low. His parachute didn't fully deploy. He was 23. The report classified it environmental hazard, non-combat. Archer requested the manual be revised to warn about ice clouds. Request denied. Environmental conditions cannot be predicted, Archer wrote in his notes. We taught Hayes to dive. We didn't teach him what to avoid. Lieutenant James Callahan died 3 weeks later. After destroying 1 fighter, he pursued a second at low altitude, toward an American supply convoy. He chose to protect the convoy instead of following doctrine. German anti-aircraft fire killed him at 3,000 feet. Official report: violated doctrine through tactical aggression. Archer's note: did what the mission required, not what the doctrine allowed. Second Lieutenant Maria Voss survived but stopped sleeping. She would sit in parked cockpits for hours, running dive calculations. A medical officer told Archer, "She kept asking if she'd pulled out in time. I said she was fine. She said not yet." Diagnosed with acute stress reaction, Voss was removed from combat duty and spent the war ferrying aircraft below 10,000 feet. After the war, she disappeared from records. When finally located in 1963, she declined to discuss the maneuver. Asked if she regretted volunteering, Voss said only, "I proved I could do what men could do. The cost doesn't change the proof." If this story surprised you, leave a like to help the channel. Captain Corwin submitted a final report in December 1944. We are asking pilots to accept danger previous generations called reckless. We are training them to execute maneuvers we know will kill some of them. We do this because the alternative would kill more. This is not comfortable, but it is our choice. The report was filed without response. The doctrine remained. Major Archer never trained another pilot, never flew combat again. In his journal, 1 year after his original dive, he wrote, 73 pilots are dead because of what I taught them. 400 enemy aircraft destroyed because of what I taught them. I don't know which number matters more. I only know I'll carry both forever." In summer 1945, a small ceremony at RAF Duxford acknowledged the HSVE maneuver's impact. 412 enemy kills, 34% improvement in mission effectiveness, measurable reduction in bomber losses, Major Archer was invited, he didn't attend. General Mitchell cited statistics but didn't mention the 73 dead American pilots. Captain Corwin stood and said, "We built doctrine that worked because men like Hayes, Callahan, and Voss risked everything. Some didn't survive. That's the cost of innovation. We honor it by acknowledging it was our choice, and we'll live with the consequences." The room fell silent. The HSVE maneuver was incorporated into U.S. Air Force doctrine in 1946. The manual included a new preface. These tactics were developed by pilots who risked their lives testing unproven concepts. Effectiveness depends on conditions that cannot always be controlled. Adherence to doctrine does not guarantee survival, it only improves probability. In Korea, 1952, American F-86 pilots adapted the maneuver for jet combat against MiG-15s. It worked, but killed 19 pilots in 6 months due to jet compressibility effects. The review board concluded losses within acceptable parameters relative to tactical advantage. The phrase acceptable parameters appeared 17 times. Thomas Archer never flew again. He worked his Montana ranch, raised horses, avoided war conversations. When asked about his role, he said only, "I made a mistake that turned out useful. That's all." In 1958, declining an interview request, he wrote, "You want to know if the maneuver was worth the lives it cost. I don't have an answer. I know it saved bomber crews. I know it killed fighter pilots. Someone had to decide to teach it. That wasn't me. I just showed them it was possible." In 1967, Navy's Top Gun School taught a high-speed vertical engagement derived directly from Archer's dive. The instructors didn't know his name. They knew only that it worked. The doctrine had outlived its creator. Thomas Archer died in 1981, age 63. His obituary made no mention of military service, describing him as a rancher who valued privacy. Among his effects, his family found a wooden box containing 3 items, a photograph of 4 P-38s in formation, a faded copy of Tactical Bulletin 44-7, and a handwritten list of 73 names. Beside each name, Archer had written a single word in pencil: "Sorry." In summer 1945, the War Department commissioned an audit of logistics operations across all theaters. The goal: determine if the high-speed vertical engagement doctrine had been worth its cost. Dr. Raymond Howell, the economist who helped design the system, led the team. The report was classified immediately and remained sealed for 32 years. When declassified in 1977, it revealed something unexpected. The HSVE maneuver hadn't just won tactical victories, it had redefined how modern militaries approached innovation itself. The numbers were staggering. Between April 1944 and May 1945, 8 and 12, American pilots trained in HSVE tactics, 1,247 combat engagements using the maneuver, 487 confirmed enemy kills, 73 American pilot deaths attributed to HSVE execution. The audit calculated effectiveness. For every American pilot lost, 6.7 enemy aircraft were destroyed. Traditional doctrine averaged 2.3 enemy kills per friendly loss. But the audit revealed something darker. Of the 73 American deaths, 41 were classified as pilot error, 19 were mechanical failure, 13 were unforeseeable circumstances, like Hayes's ice cloud. The report stated coldly, "Pilot error classification includes cases where pilots followed doctrine correctly but misjudged environmental conditions not specified in training protocols. This suggests doctrine was incomplete rather than pilots incompetent." Dr. Howell's section, heavily redacted in the original release, included analysis that made senior officers uncomfortable. The HSVE doctrine succeeded because it accepted industrial capitalism as the organizing principle of aerial combat. Traditional doctrine assumed pilots were irreplaceable assets requiring preservation. American doctrine assumed production capacity could replace losses faster than enemy could inflict them. We did not win by having better pilots. We won by accepting that some pilots were expendable if the replacement rate exceeded the loss rate. This passage was removed from the executive summary. It reappeared only in footnotes. The human cost section attempted to quantify logistics casualties. The final estimate, between 2,800 and 4,100 deaths related to training accidents, exhaustion, and unsafe operational tempo. The report noted, pilots killed during HSVE training represented 9% of total training fatalities, but accounted for 34% of advanced tactical training deaths. This suggests the maneuver's danger threshold exceeded standard training protocols. Translation: they were teaching something too dangerous to be taught safely. The audit's conclusion was clinical, but revealing. The HSVE maneuver represents philosophical transformation in warfare doctrine. Victory no longer requires superior strategy or soldiers. It requires superior willingness to accept calculated loss. This is not more moral warfare, it is more industrial warfare. The report recommended retaining the doctrine. It also recommended studying the moral implications. The first recommendation was adopted immediately. The second was never pursued. Dr. Howell submitted a personal memo alongside the official audit. I designed a system treating machines as disposable. I did not design a system treating men as disposable, but I now understand the two cannot be separated. When we teach soldiers that material has no lasting value, we also teach them that care has no lasting value. I don't know if this was necessary. I only know that it worked. Howell never published his findings. He never gave interviews. He archived the numbers and let history decide their meaning. He died in 1971. His personal papers were destroyed per his instructions. If this story surprised you, leave a like to help the channel. On May 12, 1945, 4 days after Germany's surrender, Captain Thomas Archer stood in a briefing room at RAF Duxford, addressing a room full of P-38 pilots. The war was over, but the lesson wasn't. Archer had been ordered to give one final lecture on HSVE tactics before the squadrons demobilized. He hadn't wanted to come. General Mitchell had made it clear this wasn't a request. Archer looked at the 73 pilots in the room, young men who had survived the war by learning to break rules he had accidentally invented. He spoke for 11 minutes, no notes, no slides, just words. You're here because someone decided my mistake was worth teaching. Some of you are alive because you learned it. Some of your friends are dead because they learned it. I can't tell you which outcome matters more. What I can tell you is this. We built a doctrine that traded safety for effectiveness. We accepted that some of you would die so that more of you would survive. That calculus worked. The numbers prove it. But numbers don't carry names. I carry 73 names. Pilots who died executing what I showed them. Some made mistakes, some got unlucky. Some did everything right and died anyway. The doctrine says their deaths were acceptable losses. I don't know if that's true. I only know I'm the one who has to believe it. You're going home now. The war's over. But the choices we made here don't end. They follow us. When you remember this war, remember that we won by being willing to lose. Remember that innovation has a price. And remember that someone always pays it. I hope it was worth it. I genuinely hope that. Archer stopped talking. The room was silent. He walked out without waiting for questions. 3 weeks later, Archer returned to Montana. He never flew again. He worked his family's ranch, raised horses, and avoided conversations about the war. In 1958, declining an interview about tactical innovation, he wrote, "I showed them it was possible. What they did with that knowledge was their choice, not mine. I don't know if it was right. I only know I'll live with it forever." In 1967, the Navy's Top Gun Fighter School began teaching high-speed vertical engagement tactics derived directly from Archer's maneuver. The instructors didn't know his name. They knew only that the tactic worked. The doctrine had outlived its creator. In 1981, Thomas Archer died at age 63. His obituary made no mention of military service. Among his personal effects, his family found a small wooden box containing 3 items: a photograph of 4 P-38 Lightnings in formation, a faded copy of Tactical Bulletin 44-7, a handwritten list of 73 names. Beside each name, written in pencil, was a single word: sorry. Untold. In 1982, a military historian researching World War II tactical innovation contacted Archer's family, requesting access to his papers. The family declined, but shared one document, the final page of Archer's personal journal, dated May 12, 1945. It read, "Today I gave my last lecture on the maneuver. I told them I hoped it was worth it. I didn't tell them I don't believe that anymore. I don't think it was worth it. I don't think any of it was worth it. But I also don't think we had a choice. War doesn't give you good choices. It gives you terrible choices and asks you to pick the least terrible one. I picked. They died. We won. And now I get to live with knowing that those 3 things are connected forever. There is no version of this story where I'm not responsible. There is no version where I feel good about what I did. There is only this. It worked. And that has to be enough. Because if it's not enough, then I killed them for nothing." The historian included the quote in his book. Archer's family never read it. The high-speed vertical engagement maneuver remained in U.S. Air Force doctrine until 1991, when advances in avionics and missile technology made close-range dogfighting obsolete. The tactic was officially retired. The manual was archived. But the principle remained. In modern warfare, innovation requires accepting risk that previous generations called reckless. Progress demands sacrifice. And someone always pays the price. In 2003, a German aviation museum acquired the wreckage of a Focke-Wulf FW-190 fighter shot down over France in March 1944. Forensic analysis revealed the aircraft had been destroyed by 20mm cannon fire from above and behind, an attack angle consistent with high-speed vertical engagement. The museum display included a placard explaining the historical context. It mentioned that American pilots had developed innovative tactics during the war. It did not mention Thomas Archer's name. It did not mention the 73 pilots who died proving the tactic worked. It said only, "American air superiority was achieved through tactical innovation and industrial advantage." The placard was accurate, but it wasn't complete, because the real story wasn't about innovation or advantage. It was about a pilot who made a mistake, officers who turned it into doctrine, and 73 men who paid the price for progress. Subscribe to our channel to explore more archived and disturbing cases. Thank you for following the story of the pilot who broke the rules and changed aerial warfare forever. See you in the next video. The sky remembers what doctrine tried to forget, that every innovation is written in altitude, geometry, and names no one speaks anymore.